Hello folks, how y'all doing? Today we're going to be doing some suspension work on the NC Miata back there, specifically the rear coilovers. I've been running the Ohlins coilovers for quite a few years, probably like 7 or 8 years, and they've been worked on by several different shops. They've been revalved. I ended up putting some 8K rear springs on there, and once I put those on there, the preload wasn't enough and they were rattling around, as you can see right here. So I ended up having to get some helper springs on there. And it's been in the shop recently for like the last year or so, getting a turbo installed. And in the meantime, the coilover bodies, they kind of seized up on one of the rear shocks. I had to get the front coilovers redone because oil was seeping out the seals. And after that, I decided to redo the entire suspension system, adjust the ride height, and get everything set up again. And unfortunately, one of the coilovers, it was seized because this is aluminum and we have steel. And after a while, that tends to seize together. If anybody's ever done any saltwater boating, you know you have anodes to prevent that from happening. On a car like this, you don't have it. And that's why you use anti-seize and oil and things like that to prevent that from happening. Unfortunately, the shops that worked on this, they never put anything on there. I never really looked into it, so I mean, it's my fault, partly the shop's fault. Anyways, so today we're going to go over this and reassemble everything and get it set up on the car. So these are all the typical components of a Ohlins coilover and part of Miata. We'll start with the top hat. This is the part that mounts into the Miata. There's 2 bolts that you get to from the trunk on each side, and there's one hole right here where a bolt goes in from the fender well. They are labeled left and right on each side, so they are side specific. And the coilover mounts in there. There's a threaded stud right there, shock shaft, and this here goes on the very top. And also we have a spherical washer that goes on the bottom of this. And then on top, we secure it with a nut that goes through there once it's pushed through. After that, we have the top of the coilover, which simply fits right there and goes on top of the coils. We have the helper spring right there. This fits right there. And then we have the main spring right there. There are dividers right there. We have some stainless steel and plastic bushing. These allow the springs to turn against each other without binding. Then we have the actual damper. This is the part that does all the work. There is a adjuster nut right there which locks against the body. This here fits together like this, and then this will get locked against that. And then we have the ride height adjuster that goes down in there, and it also has a lock nut, spanner lock nut right there. So this fits in there. The spring is held in place by this, the lower spring mounts. So the spring ends up fitting on here. This fits on there. This goes all the way through. And then we have the bottom part of the spring support. And this goes on there. And then at the bottom, there's a lock nut. And you tighten these against each other to lock it. The spring fits right there. And then the ride height adjuster is the final piece that screws in there. So this is how it's assembled, and along with the mount on the very top right there. All right, this is the part that was bad. This is a seized up one. Was not able to get it. It was very corroded. You can see a little bit of marks on there. Inside, I've already tried various chemicals and different things on there. I did try at first freezing it. Even tried freezing the part, trying to shrink the size before we heat it up and expand it. Followed by heat. Tried heating it up with the torch. And after that, I tried putting a chain type of leverage on there again. because of heat. I tried the strap, and heat had absolutely no effect other than being able to roast some marshmallows if I wanted to. But yeah, heat did nothing. And also tried a pipe wrench, 2-foot pry bar or 1.5 foot, something like that. Had on a bench, nothing would work. Well, I did try a big pipe wrench, strap type. I also tried chain one. Neither one made a difference. Got stuck nicely, really good and tight in the vise. And yeah, it's not going anywhere at all. And of course, tried both directions. Doesn't seem to make any difference. And this was already after applying some penetrating oil. And so force wasn't going to do anything with it. Yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know, at 1.5 feet, 2 feet of leverage and clamped it to a vise. It didn't move a bit. I tried different chemicals, PB Blaster and different Antiseize. I tried all the usual chemical solutions that were recommended. Tried PB Blaster, didn't do anything. Let's soak overnight, sprayed several times. Also tried liquid wrench. Some people online said one's better than the other. Neither one seemed to work. After that, also tried a recommendation of vinegar. I have some 45% strength vinegar, which is basically an acid, and trying to see if it will go in there and eat away at some of the corrosion. That didn't do anything. So after that, the next chemical solutions that I could have tried would have been Drano or sulfuric acid. One eats at the aluminum, the other one eats at the steel, but at that point it becomes a destructive kind of solution because it is eating away at the material. This is basically welded together, and you can see in the other one that I was able to get apart. Let me see if I can get a close-up. You can see even these threads are kind of corroded and bad looking, but this one wasn't as bad as the other one. I was still able to get this one apart, and it does move, but we're going to be cleaning all this stuff up and putting some grease and anti-seize on it when we reassemble it so that we make sure that it doesn't get stuck again. Yeah, this here is kind of a lost cause. I think the only way to get this apart would be to run a grinding piece on there and put a groove in there and then get a hammer chisel and basically split this apart. That's the only other solution I could think of. All right, so it's about to get a little bit noisy. I'm going to grind a groove in the shell right there and on both sides, and that way we can then get a chisel and split it off. All right, so we're done cutting the slot in there. And let's see, I'm not sure if it's going to be in focus or not, but we have both sides cut all the way through, and you might be able to see the threads on the inside right there. Those are threads from this part of the body, and hopefully we didn't damage them too much. We'll find out. So next we're going to get a chisel, stick it in there, and split the body apart. So first I'm going to just try from the top right there, hammering down. If that doesn't work, I'm going to attack from the sides and go there. And always wear your safety glasses. All right, that was easy enough. That one's off. And the shell is apart. That was easier than what I thought it was going to be. I thought they were going to be seized on there more, but you can see right there, two different halves, and there's a bottom and you kind of see the corrosion that we had in there. And this is a clean part that was still seized to the metal, but everything else didn't damage the threads too much. There's a little groove right there from the grinding, and there's another one over here. So this is still, with a little bit of cleanup, get a wire brush or something like that. This here will still be a usable piece. I'll probably stick it in my spare parts bin after I clean everything up, and just in case I ever need another lower part again. This, of course, is completely destroyed, and this is what I really wish that Ohlins would sell as a replacement. You can kind of see the corrosion on the inside, different layers and stuff like that, and it's junk. Yeah, I think this will make a nice little souvenir. Maybe I'll weld it and put it on my trophy case or something. Get a little example. But yeah, Olin really needs to sell these as a replacement. All right, so after the only solution being to cut a groove into the gold sleeve and split it apart destructively, I tried chemicals, I tried freezing it, I tried heat, I tried power, leverage. It just wasn't going to come apart, so I was going to have to destroy it basically off the bottom shaft and then replace it. I looked online, I did a big search. I could not find anybody selling these golden sleeves as a replacement. There are shops online that would sell you every single piece of the Ohlins damper, all the internal valves, springs, washers, O-rings. You could buy pretty much everything that's on the inside of this, but no one had the gold outer body sleeve. I was amazed at that. I ended up calling up Ohlins directly. It took me a couple of days. I left some messages. Eventually, I got through the sales, and a person went in the back, and then they said they had a used part that they could sell me. Of course, since Ohlins Ohlins USA doesn't sell directly to the consumer, they sent it to a local Ohlins distributor, and it cost me $150. And at first I thought, wow, $150, that's really kind of expensive for an aluminum threaded sleeve that's anodized. I saw some other Ohlins pieces, similar for motorcycle parts and stuff like that. They were running about $70 or $80 for something. But again, $150 is still cheaper than buying an entire new coilover. So I went ahead and bit the bullet, and I went out there and I picked it up. What I found in the box, though, was an entire lower assembly. Not only did it have this golden sleeve right here, it also had the preload adjuster nuts, had the entire lower part with that locking spanner nut, brand new sleeve. It was the entire lower assembly, which ended up being a really nice surprise, because if I did split this, I was probably going to have to do a little bit of damage to the threads in the bottom part. And so it's really nice getting an entire piece for $150, which I thought was a reasonable price for everything I got. So kudos to Ohlins USA for getting this part, but I really wish you all would sell these as a replacement part separately, because again, we're talking about aluminum and steel, and anybody that's been around boats and saltwater knows that those two metals end up seizing over time unless you take preventive action by either anti-seizing it, lubing it, using anodes, and doing other tricks. Aluminum and steel will seize eventually. So be warned, people that have Ohlins, make sure you take this apart and lube it, put your anti-seize so you don't have to go through the same problems that I did. But kudos to Ohlins USA. Hey folks, next step is the reassembly and lube. So what I'm going to be using is I'm going to mix part of a decent waterproof grease along with some Antiseize. I'll be mixing that 50-50, and then coating all the threads, shock body, all the issues that we had that seized last time. Also doing the damper, and then we're going to reassemble everything and put it on the car. All right, highly recommend these Venom steel gloves. Very good. They're double layered and fit well, and they don't tear as easy as many other gloves. You kind of see they have 2 layers on them. Very nice rubber gloves. And then we're going to mix part of the Silcoline grease. We're going to use some of the Antiseize. And this is the same stuff I used to use in the rear suspension linkage, the progressive linkage on dirt bikes. It was recommended, I think, back in the 80s or something. And it always seemed to work pretty good, because the dirt bike suspension is exposed to water and all kinds of elements. If you don't have your seals correctly, you definitely don't want them seizing, because changing the press and bearings on the rear linkage on the dirt bike is kind of a pain. I've done it before a couple times. So having a little bit of anti-seize in there will let the bearings go out, and of course the grease allows it to lubricate. And next, nothing really fancy about it. Just use your fingers and dip it in, and let's start covering all this material. And I highly recommend having the blue stuff. The anti-seize tends to be pretty messy, and it gets all over. And we're also going to do the bottom of the damper here. And you can see we have a nice thick coating on there. And that should keep it from seizing up again. And same thing in here, we have this all coated. And we're also going to coat these stainless steel washers right here. These are kind of little bushings that the springs will slide on. The last set I had got tore up while we were rotating the springs, adjusting the preload. And so they bound up, they weren't lubricated correctly. And so we ended up destroying some of these. And then we're also going to do the inside of the preload nuts. The assembly is pretty straightforward. We know this is the top of the shock body, and of course this here has a label, so it's easy to know that you're going to be screwing these pieces in right here. And there is a groove in there. I'm not exactly sure if you're supposed to go up into that or below it. And we'll lock this in place later on. Clean off any excess. Next, we're going to install the lower coil spring perch, and I'd already put some grease on there, so it should be good to go. And we're going to put this about halfway up, and that way we have enough room to adjust the preload either up or down. Next we have the locking nut. Then the lower part of this is used for the height adjustment. Nice thing about these Ohlins is they're a two-piece body, so it has a separate adjustment for the preload and for the ride height. And so these nuts are used for the preload adjustment, so you can get the travel in the correct portion of the stroke when it's sitting at static ride height. And then this part here is what you use to actually adjust the ride height, depending on your tire clearance and your stance or whatever kind of look you want in your car. And of course performance, lower ride height usually handles a little bit better. And we're going to screw this in pretty far, and that way once we get the car adjusted, I'll just lower it, or I'll just extend this out to raise the car up. So we have all of that, and then next is the springs. So first we have the AK spring right there. And I'll go down there, and then we're going to have the spacer right here. And then next is the helper spring. And that is followed by the cap. And earlier in the video I was showing this the wrong way. The part with the small pipe, this is what fits inside the spring. So some of the earlier footage had it incorrect. So this is kind of the assembly so far. Then after that, I did have an extra one of these. So I'm going to put another one on top of here so that it doesn't dig in, because these are basically, with this little hook right there, it'll act almost as if it's a lock washer. So it's nice to have some metal on there, right there. And next we put this on, and this here does have a taper. It only goes on one way. You can see right there, there's a, let me see if I can show you this. There is a taper on the very front right there. And so this will go on to match the taper. It goes on there like that. And you can see a little, the edge part is on the top of the shock. Next, we have some aftermarket spherical bushing insert. This did not come from the factory, from Miata factory. I'm not sure where I got this from. Might be Saki Bomb or something like that. But these are spherical bushings that help. They allow the shock to pivot a little bit more as it goes up and down. So we're going to put this on here next. Then this will go on. There we go. And you can kind of see the thread sticking out a little bit right there. Then we have the top of the spherical bushing that goes in there. And then after that we have the nut. And looks like the preload might be set a little bit tight. I'm going to have to push down on it just a tad. Yeah, sorry, it's out of camera shot. But right there, you can see I had to push down on a little bit, and we put the nut on top. So this is a completely assembled Ohlins DFV Coilover, and I got everything greased and lubed with Antiseize. Hopefully I won't have this problem again in a couple of years. And now we've got to do the other one. So when you're assembling the second shock, you kind of want to get both of them very similar. You want to get all the settings from for the second shock similar to what you have for the first one. One of the easiest ways to do this is to count the number of grooves or number of threads. So you can see right here where the groove is at in there. I'm counting the threads from the gold shock body up to the groove that's in the spring. Not sure if that'll come through or not, but you can kind of see the groove right below the locking collar. So I'm counting the threads. There's about 4 or so between the golden sleeve and the groove. Same thing with the preload adjuster. I'm counting the number of threads that are down here at the bottom. So we have about 3 or 4 threads down there where the locking collar is at. And then at the very bottom, same thing, we count the number of threads that are remaining on there. And so when you set this one up, you just kind of do the same thing. Look at the number of threads from the groove to the orange body. You count the number of threads that are remaining down here at the bottom to the locking nut, and also on the lower piece right there, you count the number of threads to the locking. So that way both coilovers will be set up identical. So after assembly, making sure both of them are set up very similar, spent a little bit of time getting all the extra grease off. Of course, I went way overboard on the grease as I did not want to go through that seized issue again and having to deal with the sleeve. So the final step is getting the top hat mounted, and in order to do that, use a 5mm Allen and a 7mm, and the Allen will prevent the shaft from turning, and just simply tighten this all the way on. And there's no need to over tighten it or anything like that, just snug it up a little bit. And there you go, folks. 2 Ohlins DFV coilovers reassembled, ready to go back into the car. I still got to do some adjustments once it's on there. Got to do some research, figure out what the actual travel stroke is, how much to set the preload, other things like that, and get everything final, do all the final adjustments once it's on the car. So we'll do that next. But other than that, they're all ready to go.